Welcome back, everyone, to the Humor Career Insights podcast, your guide to navigating career success in a world that's changing faster than ever. I'm your host, Vache, a certified professional career coach, human resources consultant, and founder of Humor. Whether you're just starting out, climbing the ladder, or pivoting after years in the workforce, this podcast is here to equip you with the insights and strategies you need to thrive. This season, we're tackling a topic that's on everyone's mind: the future of work, how to stay relevant and thrive. From the rise of AI and automation to the shifting demands of leadership and the skills that will set you apart, we're diving deep into what it takes to not just survive, but thrive. To help us unpack this, I'll be joined by some incredible guests, industry experts, thought leaders, and professionals who are shaping the future of work. Together, we'll explore practical strategies, emerging trends, and actionable advice to help you stay ahead of the curve. So whether you're looking to future-proof your career, embrace new opportunities, or simply stay inspired, this season is for you. Let's get ready to thrive in the future of work, starting now.
This podcast is proudly sponsored by Go My Code. Go My Code is a leading tech education institution dedicated to bridging the digital skills gap across Africa and equipping learners with the skills to thrive in the ever-changing digital world. Want to launch your career in tech or future-proof your skills in a tech-driven world? Go My Code is your go-to partner. Get hands-on training, work on real-world projects, and join a global tech community that supports your growth. No experience, no problem. Our courses are designed to be accessible, practical, and job ready. Start your journey today by calling us on 0208 730 470 or visit us at gomycode.com/ke.
Today, I am absolutely thrilled to welcome an extraordinary guest to the show, Nancy Ahola, who is joining us from New York. Nancy is an experienced executive who has successfully brought multiple companies and products to market across industries like fintech, telecom, health, and emerging tech. With a global track record of expanding businesses in Singapore, Japan, the EU, and the US, she brings invaluable insights on innovation, market expansion, and thriving in the future of work. Welcome, Nancy.
Thank you so much, Bachi. I really appreciate the time.
So, Nancy, I like to start the podcast with getting to know our guest a little bit. Please tell us about yourself. So, I want you to imagine you are a guest at a dinner party and the host is the only one who knows you. How would you like him or her to introduce you?
So I think the best way to announce myself is I'm a female founder and entrepreneur that ran a telecommunications startup, which exited, selling it to my former investors, and also corporate innovator as well, working in 25 different countries and helping companies to expand, especially in go-to-market and emerging technologies. I've been lucky enough to work in multiple industries, including healthcare, and working in emerging tech such as AI, robotics, and also genomics as well. So I think that is a brief overview, but hopefully a little bit of tidbit about myself.
Thank you for that intro. And I am sure we'll get to unpack that a little bit more as we get into the rest of the questions that I have for you. And the first one, really interested in what you think about the future of work in terms of the multiple companies and products that you've worked in. You know, you've brought multiple companies and products to market across different industries. You mentioned 25 countries. Industries, health, tech. So what do you see as the most significant shifts in the future of work for these sectors?
I think the most significant thing, probably a thing that's very top of mind with a lot of companies at the moment, is especially AI. And this is a very relevant topic, especially in regards to the workforce, because there's a lot of discussion and a lot of talk among companies whether or not AI is going to replace human beings in a lot of the jobs that are out there right now. And so I think my thought leadership in this area happens to be that AI is maybe too early in the development process to really kind of replace human beings. It's still in its infancy stage, even though it's been around for several decades at this point. But I think it's very, very important that people realize that it is just mechanism. Basically, it's based upon things like data that is put into the system, diversity, which is something that we haven't really talked about in the AI industry as well, that allows different thought processes and different perspectives, because AI in the end is really a machine. It really doesn't have that emotional impact, the emotional thought process, and the ability to discern certain things like emotions, perspective, different thought processes, because it's just taking in huge amounts of data and processing that data to come to an outcome.
That is a different viewpoint. There's a lot of panic around there. And I think I appreciate this viewpoint that it can really not replace a human being. But I mean, it's so true that like AI is really having a moment. And I think this is mostly because of generative AI, such as ChatGPT. I mean, that's what brought AI to my attention. I went through that, anxiety. And then I was also like, oh my goodness, I need to start reading up on it. And I read a quote recently that said, AI won't take your job, but people who know how to use it will. And that goes back to what you're talking about, that it's a machine. But with human beings, it definitely cannot replace human beings at the moment. But based on that, from your perspective, what skills will be most critical for professionals to stay relevant, take advantage of it in the next decade?
I think the most important skills that people can use and use AI to complement their skills is really to be strategic, to think about different ways of thinking that a machine would not be able to replicate, and also to think about not to do things that are not repetitive, because that's really where AI is going to replace human beings. There's some new element in AI called agentic AI, which is basically what its name is, which is agents that do repetitive things in jobs. Like, for instance, they were talking about human resources, creating cover letters, creating offer letters for people that are coming into a new job. Things like just kind of processing claims. Those are things that are really repetitive. So to be able to become kind of, how I would say, irreplaceable, is to really have that ability to think swiftly on your feet, be able to change, maybe take risks that machine would not be able to do, and also be a forward thinker. You are going to have to be faster than a machine at this point in time, because machine can only compute based upon the inputs. When you're thinking about things 10 steps ahead, that really becomes very, very valuable for you, especially in the workplace.
Faster than a machine.
Yes, correct.
Think that is a tall order. Think faster, I guess.
Yes.
Okay. Now, you mentioned diversity earlier, and I just got like this light bulb moment where I was like, okay, you have this huge global experience working in countries like Singapore, Japan, and the EU. Yeah, how do you think cultural differences will shape the future of work, even with AI? Yeah, and you also mentioned diversity in terms of AI. How will it shape the future of work?
So the thing is that AI, like I said before, is just based upon the inputs. And this has been a discussion in the AI community even for the last decade. Because if the people that are putting the data into what we call machine learning, or LLMs, which are language learning models, all the same backgrounds, correct? So you're looking at mostly male dominated, mostly European, Caucasian males who have a certain education set. And if they're feeding that LLM, which is how an AI is beginning to learn, then it's going to only have its own that exact perspective. This is one of the things that is in the AI community, because if you're not putting in the diversity of thought processes, if you're not putting in the female perspective, the Asian perspective, the Black American perspective, the African perspective, the South American perspective. So if you don't have those different types of perspectives, it becomes almost, and I hate to say this, maybe I won't use this terminology, but uh, more gearing towards a certain mindset that may bias itself against other different nationalities, genders, etc., if it's only learning from one particular group. So when we're thinking about diversity, because the AI is learning from different data sets and different perspectives, we have to really kind of embrace the idea that there has to be input from all different types of and walks of life. Because otherwise, what happens is that those groups become excluded. And it's very, very important. And as we're talking about these different DEI perspectives that are happening right now, different initiatives that are happening that are getting scaled back, this also applies to AI, because what ends up happening is if you don't have that diverse perspective, thought process, etc., it may even bias in things like healthcare. Because what happens is that if it has a certain data set that is only looking at certain different diseases, it doesn't take in different, outcomes potentially, because AI is thought about in healthcare. It's thought about in robotics, which can apply to different areas. So that diverse perspective and also diverse information becomes very, very important going forward into the future.
You know, very interesting, because about 2 weeks or so ago, I saw something on LinkedIn where someone had a picture representing successful professionals in the world.
Mhm.
And the picture had been generated by AI, and it was Caucasian men only.
Mhm.
So I find that very interesting. So she had asked for the AI to generate an image of successful professionals. And
Right.
yeah, and in AI's mind, or I don't know which AI tool she used, but that's what it was. So it's really the input. So the diversity is definitely at this moment probably lacking.
Yes, because what it's going to do, the AI will scan the profiles or the people that are considered quote unquote successful. And
Mm.
as we see the change of the leadership in the world, change hopefully of major corporations in the world, and as that gets pulled into the AI, gets pulled into the data sets, that will begin to evolve and change its own learnings. If we have more female leadership, if we have more diverse leadership, if we have more, backgrounds, etc., neurodiversity, etc., we're going to find that the AI will then also learn itself that, hey, leadership can look very different. It can act very different. It can have a different thought process because those inputs are going to be more prevalent as it kind of goes through its data, because it is looking for and people don't realize this, the most common recurring information to be able to somehow spit back the information. And if it's becoming very, very used to like this certain type of profile, it will go and gear towards that profile.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very evident in what I've seen. Now, I want us to shift gears a little bit and talk about go-to-market strategies.
Yes.
You've worked a lot on these for emerging tech products.
Yes.
What's your advice for professionals looking to innovate and stay ahead in fast-changing industries?
I think the most important thing is fail quickly and fast, but also pivot quickly. Because when you're working with emerging technology, a lot of times you don't have a model to be able to replicate. There's things that you're creating, and that's kind of the whole entire idea of taking things that are kind of new to the industry, things that are not evident. And so what happens, unfortunately, with a lot of entrepreneurs that are creating emergent technology is they fall in love with the baby. That's the terminology that I love to use, which is they've put so much time and effort, and understandably so, that they fall in love with it. So they tend to not really take criticism very well, but the market will give the criticism. The market will say, yes, we'll buy this. No, we won't buy this. And so to fail fast and pivot quickly, to also be very, very resource conscious. This also is in regards to money. This is in regards to the teams that you form. And so pivoting really quickly and learning to say, you know what, we're not going to throw a whole bunch of money, a whole bunch of cash, a whole bunch of resources at something until we see some type of traction that's happening in the market, because this kind of goes back to the idea of, what we call product market fit. The market is showing demand. The market is seeing that your people are buying it. But if people aren't buying it and you're throwing a whole bunch of resources at it, then it doesn't make any sense. And so that's where people need to learn and pivot quickly to see how to be able to test. So the concept of A/B testing becomes very important here, and especially in emerging technology.
I like that, Nancy. Fail quickly, but also pivot quickly.
Correct.
Yeah, we fall in love with the baby and you want to nurse it and you're like, no, it will grow, but you actually do need to fail quickly and pivot.
Yes.
Now, what do you see as the biggest challenges and opportunities for professionals in these fields as the future of work unfolds?
I think the really biggest things that really need to happen is that resources are scarce, especially in emerging technology, unless it's a hot industry. And so a lot of them, unfortunately, are chasing funding. A lot of them are fortunately not seeing success in the areas. And so to see a person that can, if they have not achieved success with their technologies, to be okay to say that, yes, I failed, but then pick themselves up and then use those like the experience and the knowledge they've gained from bringing their products to market or creating a company and applying it to something that is in the industry, so that entrepreneurship and failure in entrepreneurship is not a bad deal, that they can be able to use the experience, the resources, and the knowledge they've had previously and apply it to something going forward and be proud of what they've done before. And so that's very, very important. Another thing too is to really put yourself out there, to network, to kind of find people in the industry that you're in, or maybe parallel industries, and find that you can, reach out to people that you haven't known before to create new opportunities for yourself and to not be so shy. I think that's very, very important, especially in current times where we're seeing a lot of people facing layoffs for a variety of reasons, that somehow a community builds you and that a network is the thing that's going to help you to get to your next opportunity, whether you've succeeded or failed in your last endeavor.
I like that networking. It's something that's come up almost every person that I've spoken to has talked about networking, and that networking is the thing that's going to propel you, whether it's your next job opportunity or your next business opportunity. It's always your community. So I really like to highlight that. And I like that. Don't be so shy. A lot of us are shy.
I'm even shy, which is really surprising because people think because I have a certain amount of bravado that I'm not shy. But in reality, we're all shy to a certain extent. And so putting yourself outside of your comfort zone is going to be incredibly important for career development.
Thank you, Nancy. With your experience in scaling companies and leading global teams, how do you think remote and hybrid work models will shape the future of leadership and collaboration? I mean, it's the new thing. Like after COVID, remote work was like, it became something that was the norm, right? And now a lot of organizations have stayed in that remote and hybrid work models. So how would that shape the future of leadership and collaboration?
This has become a really hot topic, especially since there have been a lot of return to work orders these days. Things like people complaining about the cost of office space and should they get rid of office space or teamwork, etc. I think because personally, I've been doing remote work work for so many years at this point, that it's really, really important for those touch points to happen. You don't have to necessarily have a 5 day a week in office experience in order to build great teams. And the reason why is because, especially if you have global organizations, time zones are going to be a really big challenge. But I think making sure that your team is working well together, that you have a belief that everyone has a say in what's going to happen, because those perspectives and those viewpoints can really help you as, teamwork happens, leadership happens, and even creating great products, because sometimes what happens is you need to have collaboration. And you can have collaboration remotely and in a hybrid organization. You don't necessarily have to have face to face all the time. Though one thing that I do suggest is, if you have a fully remote organization, to have maybe once a quarter or a certain amount of time that you do have face to face work, because what happens is that connection to your team members and with leadership and their teams, it's important to somehow get that face-to-face time, because you have a very different perspective if it's just a Zoom call, or a different perspective if you just have phone calls or emails. And so just a little bit of touch points and have face-to-face time, I think is absolutely essential going forward with even remote and hybrid organizations.
Okay, that emotion, we talked about human beings, that machines cannot replace human beings. And what makes us human beings is the emotions, the ability to connect with other human beings. So those touch points are critical for sure.
Definitely. And then one other thing that I would add to it is, especially in global organizations, sometimes things can be misconstrued across cultures. And with that FaceTime, that, having that ability to be across a table from someone, share a meal with someone, be in an office and laugh with someone, sometimes that ability to have some cross-cultural misunderstandings begins to kind of fade away when you have a little bit of FaceTime with each other. But at the same time, too, if you have the ability to have teams working remotely, you become almost a 24/7 organization, which then in reality helps your company, because you can be operating in different time zones, different that ability to go forward is really, really helpful as well. And so I highly encourage that organizations, especially global organizations, embrace remote workplaces.
And you've helped companies expand into global markets quite a lot.
Yes.
Is that, do you find that those that embrace this, cultural diversity for one, and also embrace the ability to work across many countries, do you find that it helps the expansion?
Yes, totally. So, I mean, the thing is that, and a lot of companies don't realize that you can't stay only in your market. You can only hit a certain point, especially as we all think about revenue. Workplaces are tied into revenue. That's how we make our salaries. And so, with especially expanding across into different markets across the globe, it's extremely important. And this is becoming more and more apparent, especially in even investment communities, that you cannot just concentrate on only one market or one geography alone, that you no longer are able to have unicorns if you just kind of stay in your own backyard. And so it's extremely important. And that's where you embrace diversity, embrace cross cultures, embrace different types of backgrounds, because that becomes absolutely key and essential to your organization. You can't just stay in your own backyard and think that you're going to become this great, huge, big organization. And even we find that these big monolithic unicorns have to embrace globalization. We found that companies like Uber have actually failed in other markets, like, they failed in China, they failed in Southeast Asia. Things that are not working in South America but may work in the US, you have to take those things into consideration, and you have to adapt and localize your products and your services, especially as an organization.
Be prepared to think out of the box.
Definitely.
Now, I want to link that to a professional looking to build careers that actually transcend borders and industries. What strategies would you recommend to such a professional?
Well, I would recommend to that type of professional is be okay being uncomfortable. And the reason why I say that is because you are going to learn a lot of different things that you may not have known previously, especially when you're working in other geographies. And so you have to sometimes be okay to embarrass yourself, because what you find as a norm is your own cultural norm that might not be acceptable in other geographies. So I would say be okay to be uncomfortable, because you may also be asked to do certain things that are very, very important to your teammates or your team members going forward, that they may not see as something appropriate that they do every single day. So, for instance, I lived in Europe. I worked in Europe as well. And there's a culture where I lived, which was in Finland, which is the sauna culture. Extremely different. A lot of cultures don't embrace it because it's something that they don't have. But in that particular culture, sometimes even business deals are made in a sauna. So
really?
yes, it's crazy. And so find different you're going to have to experience different things and be okay doing different things as well, and embrace doing new things and embrace being embarrassed sometimes, being a little bit uncomfortable, as long as it's not offensive in any kind of way. So I would highly recommend that step out of your comfort zone. Be okay, experience new things, because sometimes it will help you to bond better with a team member, bond and better with, leadership in other organizations. And so be okay being uncomfortable sometimes.
Yeah, I think that resonates with me. Having worked in different countries, from the culture that I was used to, that I was brought up in. And there's a lot of times where you are uncomfortable, where you don't know what you're supposed to do, you don't know what you're supposed to say. And for sure, sometimes you do get embarrassed. And yeah, being okay, being uncomfortable, and being open to learning, I think is critical. That learning and unlearning cycle.
I think that statement about unlearning is a great thought process, because sometimes we have preconceived notions, especially different geographies, and we go into those geographies with those preconceived notions, and we may actually embarrass ourselves because we thought something is X way, but in reality it's Y way. And so that is a really important concept to think about, is to go in with an open mind so that you can maybe relearn something in some type of way and not offend a potential client, a potential customer, a potential teammate. And so I think, is something really important.
Yeah. When I looked at your background and I was like, oh, wow, Nancy has done so much in terms of the global market and companies. I thought to myself, as a professional looking for work in global markets, it's the same sort of principle as, trying to get a product to different markets, right? And yeah, and in the world that we live in now, you really cannot silo yourself into, I am from New York, and this is where I'm going to work, and this is where I'm going to stay and live. There is so much global influence, so much out there that you can actually impact. You can end up working in Finland, like you said.
Right.
So, yeah. So thinking of ourselves as professionals, as global, I think that is the way the future is headed. What are your thoughts?
I think I have a little bit of a different view, because the thing is that this is becoming a bit difficult, and this is also becoming very prevalent in politics as well, because there's this big discussion about how many expatriates are going to be um, in a particular country, or how many immigrants that we take into a geography. So before, and this is also pre-COVID as well, and there was a lot of people going across different geographies. And so I think what happens is that while you can have a perspective about I'm here in this particular place, like in New York, etc., you have to take a little bit of thought process about like, I may not be able to find a particular job in my own market, but I can stay within the US per se, or I can stay in English speaking countries. And so while we had a lot more mobility in previous times, especially pre COVID, we're not finding as much mobility now post COVID as we did before. And so this is going to be interesting. And this is where politics comes into play, as far as how businesses work, as far as businesses evolve. And, now working globally, this is something that is very much impacting what I do on a day-to-day basis, because work is now across different globes, and different things that are happening is now being affected by politics. And so we're trying to like be very good about, how do we go across geographies? And as a professional, I would say have an open mind. Think about, if you're going to go to another country, take the opportunity, but it's not going to be the same way that it was before. Previously, the way that it worked was that companies were going to be very plush. They were going to give you these expat packages. Learn to be a local. That is something that I would highly embrace, as a professional is out there as well, which is learn that it's, really good to be constantly learning. That's one thing I would stress more than anything else, especially with the future of work, is constantly learn. That it's never too old or too young to learn, to be constantly ability to have change, constantly the ability to evolve, I think is really, really important. And that's also goes back to the whole idea of like AI. When you're constantly learning and evolving, you then have that humanity that helps you to become an amazing professional out there.
Yeah. And I'd also like to add to that in that there's no, like in the world we live in now, the physical move is possibly not necessary. I mean, we have customer service in India,
Yes.
but they are working for American companies, and we have people in Africa that are doing virtual admin work for European companies.
Mhm.
So I think that global aspect, in the sense of, hey, I can do remote work working for an organization in, let's say, India while I'm based in New York.
Right.
Y-
Yeah. And another thought process too is that this whole idea, especially during COVID, is of digital nomads.
mm,
Countries are also doing things like giving residency or even citizenship to people who are digital nomads. Estonia has what's something called e-resident. Um, Thailand, different countries out there are embracing the idea of digital nomads. Americans, living overseas but working for an American company. Someone in Portugal working for a UK based company, someone in, Senegal working for someone in Spain. So I think it is definitely not the world we used to live in and the world we work in. That it has definitely evolved, especially with the idea of Zoom and conference calls and things like that. And technology has become so mainstreamed that it becomes much easier for us to have mobility in different geographies.
Yeah, I mean, look at us right now, Nancy. You're sitting in New York. I'm sitting in Florida, and Simba is sitting in Nairobi, and we are able to have this three-way.
Yes, totally. And this is the amazing thing about technology, which is we couldn't think of this like 5 years ago or 10 years ago. But now this has become so commonplace and part of our everyday life that it is becoming a part of the fabric of every human being at this point.
Yes, and the podcast gets downloaded in every corner. So, I mean, the technology has really driven us to where we really need to think outside of the box, like I said earlier, outside of what we are used to, and be okay with being uncomfortable.
Yes, very much so. I mean, what I think is absolutely amazing is that I am seeing people from all over the world and being able to reach into every single part of the globe. And as a professional who has worked globally, I find it so amazing. And I'm very happy to see those types of things because I would love to see people from all kinds of geographies have amazing opportunities. And I feel like technology has definitely helped to enable that.
Now, let's talk about leadership again. How do you think leadership needs to evolve to meet these new demands?
I think leadership is at an inflection point right now. And this is something that is becoming incredibly complicated at this point because we're seeing it, especially today, which is a no spend day, which is kind of a fight back towards a lot of the leadership that's happening right now, which is being very, very dominated by leadership that believes that you do what they say and that there should be no conversation, conversation done. I think in leadership is evolving to the point where there has to be a back and forth conversation, that there has to be some elements of um, collaboration right now because it is incredibly, people are voting with their feet, whether it is employees leaving a company en masse, whether it is customers that are not buying products, whether it is a fight back by partners, etc. And I think leadership is now at a point where it can no longer be. Um, I hate to use the word totalitarian, but it's kind of coming to that point where it's like there has to be some back and forth. There has to be some conversations. There has to be some feedback and acceptance of feedback from, different parts. And so I think leadership is at really, really difficult point right now. And I'm wondering, as a person that works in leadership, how much is going to be embraced and how much fight back there's going to be from both an employee standpoint, both partnership standpoint, customer standpoint. We are at a very, very interesting time in the world right now. And so I think as a leader myself, I always want to hear what the people around me are saying, whether it's a partner, whether it's an employee, whether it is a person on the executive team, whether it's an intern, because that helps to kind of change and evolve an environment to something that's going to be hopefully an incredible environment to be in general.
Have you found as a leader, in terms of, I like to think, like, this generation gap? Have you found that as a leader, you have a different strategy for the different generations?
At times, yes. And so, like yesterday was a perfect example. I'm working with a leadership team that happens to be, I guess they're millennials, so a lot younger than me at this point, and they work in a very different industry, which happens to be in the entertainment industry. And so I'm just amazingly surprised at this point sometimes how bold that they can be, which is great, and I love it. Which as the differentiation, I'm part of Generation X, that we kind of are a little bit more reserved about things because, how we deal with boomers versus how we deal with millennials versus, Gen Z. It's you have to sometimes give a little bit of flexibility. So what I might find is acceptable as Generation X and working with a millennial, it can be frustrating at times, especially as a leader, going, Okay. Yeah. I understand it. And so you have to be a little bit open-minded, especially as you're working with different generations too. And it works both ways too, because it can be frustrating working with boomers as well, because they have a very different perspective and a little bit more, this is the way that it's done. Versus like then there you've got a millennial or Gen Z who is like, well, you know what, we can, somehow think about this in this way and embrace it. And I just kind of go, okay, I'll adapt my leadership style to that particular team member and try to be as mindful as a leader to what they need in order for them to hopefully feel like they're included in the conversation and that they're doing the best. I am a very big proponent of, like, I want you to do your best as you can, and it doesn't need to be perfect, but at least try. That's kind of my viewpoint.
To do your best. I mean, you can only do that much, right? And
Right.
yeah, and even with teams, like building resilient teams that can adapt to constant change and uncertainty is something that I think is really needed right now. Lots of change, lots of
Yeah.
uncertainty. Now, what's your approach to building those teams that do their best?
They do their best, and sometimes I always tell the teams that I have, especially when there are times of uncertainty, that there's that it's okay to fail, it's okay to test, it's okay to be scared or uncertain, but the whole idea is that we're doing it together. I don't expect them to give up their lives in order to be able to run a company. I mean, this has been a whole discussion, especially in the leadership world, about work-life balance. I mean, there's been this whole conversation back and forth, because this also kind of relates to times of uncertainty as well, which is that you just have to learn to be flexible, and that you have to learn that certain things don't define you. Success doesn't define you. Failure doesn't define you, but that constantly learning and changing and evolving is going to be really key and critical, especially in uncertain times, that what has worked previously may not work going into the future. And that applies across every single generation.
Lots of uncertainty, lots of job losses.
Yes.
Yeah, there's really that need to be resilient.
Yes. And to be resilient doesn't necessarily mean that you just keep on taking the punches, because that's what I think a lot of people think that the word resilient necessarily means, which is that you just put up with anything and you let individuals, unfortunately, as I like to say, and it may not sound so great, but use and abuse you, but that you kind of say, I get to choose what I accept, and then I am going to take a look at these things and be mindful of the choices that I make. So that's really where resiliency, and also just kind of being okay through tough times, because sometimes it's okay to take that little time for self-care. Sometimes it's okay to do that, to say, I'm not okay, and then reach out to your community to get some support, especially in difficult times. This is really, really, like they've been talking about massive layoffs in different industries. And I think this is where we really kind of need to band together as a community in general.
Yes, to take care of each other.
Yes.
Take care of ourselves and take care of each other.
Yes, definitely. Because I think that's something that's a bit lacking at the moment, which is the humanity that really needs to be out there, because that is going to be absolutely key and essential going forward, even as a leader, to be, understanding that not everyone can be you, and that it's okay that not everyone is you.
I was heartened to see on LinkedIn there's a huge, huge drive of people putting out jobs, just posting new jobs and links to new jobs, to particularly targeted to people that have been laid off. There's a community of career coaches that has come together to say, we are going to give some of our time free to anybody who is needing help. So that community is really banding together. I was heartened to see that.
I think it's absolutely amazing, and especially ones like I'm seeing it across female leadership. I've been also seeing it in the DEI, community, which has been impacted quite a bit. I mean, and it's great because it shows that people understand that there are basic needs that need to be fulfilled through a job. And so I think it's an amazing to see a lot more traction and people trying to help each other. And I think that's absolutely great.
Yes, it is. It's absolutely fantastic. And what 3 programs or jobs would you encourage your son or daughter in high school now to choose? One that is future proof.
So actually, I do have 2 teenage children, so this is a very appropriate question. And one of them is just on into college. And I believe the 3 subjects or the 3 kind of courses that I would suggest I have a son and a daughter, that I would recommend would be number 1, computer classes, because we are so much of a tech savvy culture, and this applies to different types of different cultures across the world. That technology is extremely important. That computer science is becoming a major driver in careers at this point in time. And I think that would be something, even a basic course, so that you don't have to necessarily be an engineer, but something that lets you understand how everything works in the first place. Another thing that I would highly recommend for students that are out there, especially ones that are in high school, is something about learning to understand cross-cultural communications, because we are a global society at this point in time. And so I think a lot of times things get misunderstood and lost in translation. So I think that, especially as we are a very global society, to have that ability to kind of understand other cultures is going to be extremely important. So that would be another thing that I would suggest. And I think the last one that I would say is marketing. And the reason why, and I'm very biased in this, because marketing can be used in several different ways, which is you can market yourself, because especially as a teenager, and especially even as we grow older, we don't know how to market ourselves very well in general. And we have to be our own best cheerleader. That's very, very important. But another thing too is marketing in general is very, very important, because that's how we sell. That's how we sell products. That's how we sell services. That's how we sell technology. It's very, very important. So those 3, I think, would be very important, especially for people in high school and even people that are older. So computer science, at least 1 computer science course, 1 cross-cultural course, and 1 marketing course.
I like those, and especially marketing, because, we spoke about being shy,
Yes.
and marketing is not shy.
No. Not at all. But it doesn't need to be arrogance either, though. I mean, that's the thing that people don't understand. It's more about confidence than it is about arrogance.
Yeah. Teaching, I think in terms of confidence, it's really learning to be confident from a young age.
But I would give it a little bit of a side note there, which is confidence in a good way, because sometimes overconfidence can backfire a bit.
Yeah, it can become arrogance.
Yes.
So there is also talk that university education or, a degree is not important. Skills are more essential. I think we saw recently there was a world thought leader who just, they were looking for someone, they were looking to hire some people, and they were just like, oh no, I'm not interested in your education. Just send me what you can do.
Right.
What are your thoughts on that?
I have very mixed feelings towards that. And the reason why is earlier in my career, I got my university education a little bit later in life. And what I found is that some of the skills that I did get in college were very, very helpful. But I understand his viewpoint, because in reality, getting a university education and college didn't necessarily set me up for success. That those pieces for success, so I kind of built up in myself, which is how do I learn? How do I get skill sets? So that's one of the reasons why I have mixed feelings towards it, because you can learn a lot of the things that you can find in your coursework online. And a lot of times you can just read the books. But I believe that there has to be at least a little bit of formalized education, because it gives you some ability to work with other people, and it gives you a little bit of structure so that at least there's some understanding. But another viewpoint that I have is that you don't need to put yourself in so much debt in order to be able to get what, in essence, some organizations feel is essentially a driver's license. So I see this, especially here in New York, that, they want it from top 4 universities or top Big 10 schools or whatever. And I don't necessarily think that means that you have, always the skill set in order to be able to succeed in those types of jobs. And so I think would prefer that at least there's some bit of education, but I really want to see their skills. I really want to see how they adapt, because a lot of times people that have those degrees of those top skills have absolutely no social skills whatsoever. And the emotional intelligence is very much absent, and also a sense of arrogance. And so I really want to see like what you can do. I mean, how you can prove yourself, how hard you're going to be willing to work. And also another thing too is how quickly you learn. That's extremely important, because whether you went to college or you didn't go to college, how quickly you can learn is going to be really impactful to any organization.
Yeah, so the degree, the qualification, it gives you a foundation. But
yes, yeah, to a certain extent, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you have the ability to do a job. So like I said, I would prefer that there's maybe a mixture, at least some foundational courses.
Looking at like a 50, 60-year-old, they were looking to retire.
Yes.
But a lot of them are having to be forced to go back to work or to college. And with AI and tech, do you see 50, 60-year-olds having or being able to in the current work and in future in the future of work that we are looking towards, how can they navigate the AI challenges, the tech challenges, and being forced to go back to work?
I think that they are not lost causes whatsoever. I think they have valuable information and valuable experience that can be incredibly crucial and incredibly helpful. But at the same time, too, they need to find, the types of jobs that really use their skills. And this is, something that we see a lot in the industry in regards to age bias, especially with technology, etc. But in reality, sometimes they have some really good experience that can't be learned through AI or that can't be learned through technology. And so by allowing someone that's older in their 50s or 60s that may not be as technologically adept, they can be really good at like building some amazing organizations, because they have the experience of like dealing with human beings in general. And so I think it would be beneficial to organizations, even if they don't have an AI or tech background, because they know how to work with people. And that's extremely important, because people are the thing that runs the world, right? Basically.
Yes.
But at the same time, too, this is where they need to find their kind of right fit, or that they can be able to somehow, they can be able to find their niche. They have to find where they really thrive very well and who are the people that are going to be their advocates.
Now, this is just a thought as you were speaking, how can one lead when you don't know, like, okay, for one, AI is like, it's a forest to me. I'm
Yes.
still trying to navigate it. And I'm leading a team that is like, in touch with everything, emerging tech, really smart. How can I lead them? How can I lead these teams
Mhm.
and stay relevant when they know more than me?
Well, then that's a good thing, right? Because the thing is, if you know everything, you're going to be biased in what you're creating because you think that you know everything. So therefore, you're going to want to have things be done your way, right? But if
Yeah.
you have a team and there are different skill sets and there's different knowledge and they have different things that are happening in that team, allowing them to kind of shine in the areas that they are very good in and allowing people to go off and constantly evolve and learn, I think is to your benefit. And as a leader, you kind of guide them as you're talking about the forest, right?
Yes.
What's going to happen is that you're going to be the person guiding them through the forest so they don't hit the trees.
Mm.
I think that's very, very important because a lot of times the human element, the emotional intelligence is kind of a bit absent. And I think as a leader, that's kind of how you got to your leadership position is that you have that emotional intelligence. You have that ability to be able to collaborate and to, kind of work together. And I think you don't necessarily have to be the smartest person in the room.
Mm.
You just need to know how to work with the smartest people in the room. Because a lot of times I have worked with people who are tremendously more intelligent than I am. And it baffles me sometimes. But at the same time, I also see that the emotional intelligence may not be there. And so learning to how to guide those people to find some kind of answer. I mean, I remember earlier on in my career, especially working with a lot of engineers, some engineers would come back to me and say, yeah, you know what? That can't be done. And my answer would always be, really? It can't be done? I don't know. I think it can be done. Can you give me another way of doing something versus giving me an absolute answer? So challenging people and saying, no, yes, that it's in absolute terms. I don't believe in that. And so my leadership style is give me an option. See what you could be able to do because what I'm doing is challenging them, which then gives them some kind of energy and some goals to kind of go, you know what? I'm going to prove you wrong. Or at the same time, too, they also realize that you're actually supporting them and you're mentoring them to hopefully become the best version of themselves.
I think that is a great skill, Nancy. And I like what you said about you don't have to be the smartest person in the room. You just have to know how to work with the smartest people in the room.
Yes.
I like that. Thank you once again, Nancy, for joining me on Humor Career Insights and sharing this vast knowledge. I am grateful to you. Now, if you could leave our listeners with one piece of advice, what would that be? A piece of advice to future-proof their careers. What would it be?
I think the best advice to future-proof your career is be constantly learning because there are so many things that have changed and evolved, even in the span of a year, even in the span of 5 years or 10 years, and be constantly learning and know that you're always a work in progress. By embracing the idea of knowledge, you'll never be at a detriment at all. So always learn.
Future-proof your career by constantly learning. Thanks, Nancy. I appreciate you.
Thank you so much for that. I really appreciate it. This was a great conversation. I love it.
Listeners, thank you for joining us today on Humor Career Insights. I am sure you've been inspired as I have. Until next time, stay inspired.